All right, everyone. Welcome to the Real Estate Game Changer Show. My name is Mike McKay, based in the Jacksonville, Florida market. If anyone's down here in Jacksonville, needs help on deals or needs to sell deals, feel free to reach out to me. We're still pretty actively buying in Jacksonville, even though a lot of people have pulled back. We are still an active player in the market. Each and every week on this show, except next week because we're off for the holidays, we interview people who are changing the game of real estate all over the country. And this is a live show, so please post any questions, any comments you have, and I'll bring them up to our guest to answer. This week, our guest that we have is Greg Helbeck. Greg, welcome to the show, man.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to this.
Yeah.
I'm really excited to be a guest, especially on a live show the day before Christmas Eve.
I'm wondering if we're going to get a really good turnout or really slow, but actually, there's already some people tuning in, so I think it's going to be good. So,
There we go. Look at that. They know. I think I posted it on my story, so some people probably maybe took a little mental tab of that and they're tuning in now. So if you are, welcome.
yeah, cool, man. Well, before we jump into everything, if you just want to give a little background about how you got started in the real estate business.
Yeah, so I got started in 2015 in September of 15, so
Mhm.
7 years ago, which is crazy. I didn't like, you don't really know how time flies, right? Until you like look back and say, like, wow. So I was 20 years old and I was living actually here in New York, and I was going to community college and I had not much going on for me. I started reading like self-help books because I had, nothing else to do. And I remember going to a seminar and they were talking about, this is like up in Newburgh, so about 25 minutes from where I am right now. They were talking about double closing houses, and I'm like, double closing houses? That sounds insane. Like, you just find a deal and then someone buys it and you make the difference. Like, it just, to me, it like sounded really like possible.
So, Greg, you had mentioned before something that I had never heard anyone else before mention. You said the Social Security Death Index. What was that?
Yeah, it sounds like a crazy thing. So what it is it's like there's a databases like skip tracing companies like Skip
Hmm.
Genie, IDI, all these different companies. They just run their data through the SSDI. So when I say Social Security Death Index, that's just when you use a skip tracing service to find out if that person's dead or not, right? And it's just all through one database, basically. So the other thing you can do on AccuZip, which is kind of like a dormant software at this point, it's super old, but you can
Hmm.
see if they're deceased. It'll tell you if they're, because it takes through the Social Security Death Index too. So basically, it'll
Uh,
tell you if the owner is alive or dead. And then what I would do is I would take like the tax delinquent list to start. I'd run it against all the vacant properties, and then I would have an overlap of tax delinquent vacant. And then I would take the tax delinquent vacant and throw it through the Social Security Death Index on a skip tracing software. And then I'd have like this crazy list of like these unicorn deals. And I remember I would go and I would like look up the property, and then I would go and see how much taxes they owed. And it was like 20 grand, 15 grand. And I was like, oh man,
yeah,
this is a juicy deal. Like, someone's basically letting this thing go back to the county. And I'm going to reach
yeah.
out to the heirs and see if they want to save it before it goes back to the auction. Cause like a lot of these sellers, like a lot of the deals that we would do back in the day were like, oh, I didn't think I owned it. I thought the bank already owned it. I thought the taxes already, like the county already owned it. We were like, no, you still own it. There's all these title issues on there. We can help you fix these title issues in exchange, and we'll give you 10 grand. So what we would end up doing is we would get these properties so cheap because
Mm.
the sellers didn't even know they even owned them. So it was like we were getting these crazy deals that were like abnormal, and then we would sell them for like cash buyers, and we would make a pretty good wholesale fee because we were getting them so cheap because the sellers didn't really want them. So it was like a
Mm.
reverse like negotiation almost. It's like, no,
Right.
you own the property. No, we're going to give you money. Like, let's just like explain to you how this isn't a scam, right? Because a lot of these deals had
Hmm.
major title problems on them, like multiple heirs and affidavits of heirship and all this crazy shit. So we had to really get good at solving title problems, which I've definitely learned how to do a lot over the last 4 years, 5 years.
Yeah, for sure. And then, you mentioned you went back to New York at some point, and originally you had kind of left New York because of this whole attorney state thing. And I know a lot of people, I used to be a real estate broker in New York myself, and it's just a different process than it is, like, for example, in Jacksonville, where you sign a two-page agreement and you're off to the races. So, What did you change about your process to operate successfully in an attorney state like New York?
Yeah. So you have to have the right expectations. Like I was so disappointed in the beginning of my career because I was like, oh my God, I was taking everybody who was doing deals in other states and having that be my baseline of expectations, right? So I
Hmm.
was always like, oh my God, why does it take 3 weeks to get a contract? Like this guy just signed it in 2 days. So I, number one, figured out my expectations. I had to realign them to the reality of what the market was. But
Hmm.
number two, I'll be completely transparent with you. I had all these other houses going on in Texas. So like we had these like big delays in deals in New York and like we were closing all these deals in Texas. So like to me, I didn't care because I was still making money. So it didn't really matter until we started building up a real pipeline in New York, and then it wasn't an issue. But the third thing is like, in New York, you have to understand that a standard real estate transaction is going to be between a buyer's attorney and a seller's attorney. And you have to understand that the seller's attorney most likely is going to be a pain in the ass. And when you anticipate that and you know what objections they're going to have, you can go and come up with an idea to solve them. But a lot of new investors, they just like think like, oh my God, this attorney wants me to put 3 grand down. That's crazy. Standard is 10%. If you're buying a house for 300 grand, they normally want 30. So the fact that you don't even want to put 3 down is kind of telling that attorney, like, oh, this guy's probably not going to close for some reason. So you have to just understand, you got to put a big deposit down. And when I say big, I mean at least $1,000, if not more. And then you have to understand that seller's attorney is basically running the entire transaction, and the entire deal is predicated upon the seller's attorney and their ability to get any title issues cleared. And, with all that being said, it just takes like twice as long to close business in New York because there's so many more people involved. And if you're okay with that, the benefits I will tell you is that the profits are much bigger. There's less competition because not a lot of people want to deal with this crap. And I understand why, because I'm on both sides of the table. And
Hmm.
it's impossible. This is my favorite thing. It's impossible to get snaked in New York. You can't get snaked out of a deal. Like if you have a wholesale deal and you're actually in contract with an attorney and someone tries to go behind your back, you can never get cut out of a deal because number one, there's lawyers involved. And number two, if the seller tries to get out of a contract that's fully executed in New York, you can sue them for specific performance. You can file list pendants on the property, which is the same thing as a foreclosure. It stops the sale. And you can, if they don't want to sell it to you after the list pendants, you can sue them for the entire purchase price. So if you're buying a property for 500 grand and they don't want to sell it to you, then you could say, okay, well then give me 500 grand. And that's completely legal and you will win every time. I'm not an attorney, obviously, but it's great because like when you wholesale here, you don't really need to worry about guys going behind your back because it's like they can't do
Hmm.
anything. Like there's no like way that you can get screwed out of a deal. So I like it because you're able to like, wholesale deals here and not feel like you got to like hide the address, and in other states I like put like XXXX Smith Street, and then I like DM me for the full address, because I know there's
Yep.
snakes, especially in like Delaware. That's loaded with snakes down there. But anyway,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, there's a lot of benefits to doing business in New York. And then like the fact that you have attorneys, legitimizes all your transactions. So like when you're
Yep.
buying a house at a super deep discount from a seller and they have an attorney repping them and the attorney doesn't kill that deal, you can't get sued afterwards because the seller had an attorney. So like in
Yeah.
other states, like let's say you buy a house in foreclosure in like Maryland, for example, and you don't follow a certain process, you can actually like get in serious trouble because there's certain rules. Like I know just in Maryland, for example, like you have to like give the seller a period to like cool off and this and that. But yeah, New York is great because you don't have to really worry about getting in trouble after deals go down because you have attorneys representing you.
Yeah. So how does that, I mean, down here in Jacksonville, like, if you're doing in-person appointments, you're typically taking a contract with you. If you're doing it on the phone, you're kind of docu-signing on the spot. Like we just did, one earlier today, we docu-signed it on the spot. Obviously, that's not the same up in New York. So how does that conversation, I'm always curious from the sales perspective, like how does that conversation look like with the seller and how do you make sure they're not going to use, even when I was a broker in New York, if they wanted to use their Joe
Yeah.
Blow cousin who's just a general attorney, you knew you were in trouble because they didn't know kind of the
Ooh.
process, right? So,
So in New York, what happens? That's a great. I'm glad you brought that up. Is when you and listen, there are times and ways that you can do a deal with a seller on DocuSign in New York. It just doesn't
hmm,
happen a lot. You can do it if a seller doesn't want to have an attorney. You can certainly do that. Should probably have them sign an affidavit or something like that. But standard process is they already have an attorney and they're going to use an attorney, or they know they got to use an attorney and you got to refer them an attorney. So if that's the case, then that's a little different. But normally what I do is I set the seller's expectations, or my acquisitions guy in this case sets the seller's expectations. Hey, at this point, you're going to have to reach out to your attorney and you're going to tell them exactly what's going on. And I'm going to send you a follow-up email with all the details about this transaction. And then your attorney is going to send my attorney a contract, and I'm going to get the contract from my attorney, review it, make sure there's nothing crazy in there, and then I'll sign it, send the deposit to my attorney. He'll send the deposit to your attorney, and then when your attorney cashes the check, then we're in contract. That takes 2 weeks, right? At least. Sometimes
Mhm.
shorter, but usually about 2 weeks. So what I normally do at that point is once I set the stage with the seller, I will then email my attorney all the details that I just told the seller and tell him, like, yo, ask this attorney immediately to send you a contract with all of these terms. Normally they send something back. It's completely not the way that you want it. They want
Yeah.
like way more money than you need to put down. They don't let you assign the contract. You have to take it like as is with all these crazy open permits. So then you got to do is you got to go back, send them an addendum, basically. I guess the proper word in like Florida. Not, we call it a rider up here, but it's
Yeah.
called an addendum most places. Yeah, it's stupid in New York. And you basically say like, this is our deposit we're putting down. We need it to be assignable. We're not taking it with open permits, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then the sellers has to agree with it. But it's all done through the attorney. It's not done through you and the seller. And then if there's a problem, like then you call the seller and say, hey, like I need to be here. Tell your attorney that that is what we're going to do. And then the attorney, once they hear from their seller, will usually agree to it. So, I mean, the thing that I've realized is like when you have that process going on, the problem is that your deals take a long time to close, so your cash conversion cycle is slow here. So like a quick
Yeah.
wholesale deal is 3 or 4 months in my area. Like there, I still have wholesale deals going on right now that been in contract since the summer. We haven't closed them
Wow.
because there's just just problems. The attorneys aren't on the same page and this and that. We can do deals quick, like if everything lines up and I'm going to buy it myself and I don't want to pull a municipal search, I can close in 3 weeks. But that's not normal in New York. It's normally like a quick deal is 5-6 weeks. Quick,
Yeah.
right? So the benefit, though, like I mentioned earlier, is like a lot of people don't like to deal with that. Like it's not,
Mhm.
and a lot of new investors, they realize that this is the reality around here, and they go somewhere else, right? So there's less competition here. Like there's certainly people buying here, but it's not like Texas where there's 17,000 wholesalers, or even Tampa, Florida, or probably Jacksonville too, where there's a lot of guys running around trying to get the same inventory, right? So we have a little bit less competition here. And it's nice, right? Because if we're competing with somebody, it's usually like 1 or 2 buyers, 3 buyers max. Like we don't ever really have sellers say, "Oh, I got 8 people I'm talking to." Like I don't think I've ever heard that in New York ever.
Yeah.
Just doesn't
That's a
exist.
Jacksonville thing.
Yeah, yeah, I bet.
And then
You probably get a lot of out-of-state people going to Jacksonville because they think it's easy.
they lock up a contract at a price that makes no sense at all.
Oh yeah, and then
Terrible.
they try to sell it to you. Yeah, and you're like, this is a
Yeah.
terrible deal.
And I say I'm about half
I
that.
know how that goes.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Um, and then like I'm just curious. I mean, the attorneys ever give you pushback on the assignability or any of that stuff?
Oh yeah,
Uh,
all the time. So if you don't need, and this is not legal advice on everybody, but I know the game pretty well here. You don't need to have the contract be assignable to wholesale it. You could do a double close in New York, and it's like the same thing as an assignment. You can technically use the buyer's money to fund the deal. This isn't legal advice, but you could do that in New York. I do it all the time. So if the contract isn't assignable, you can sign a separate contract with a new buyer. And then the day of closing, you can literally use that buyer's money to fund the deal with the seller, and the difference goes to you. Actually, that's how we do a lot of our deals because it just makes the whole thing a little less messy because we do have an A to B with the seller and we have a B to C with the buyer. Two separate transactions, two separate deeds, two separate transfer tax. We just did one of those on Wednesday. We closed one out, double close. And the seller knew we bought it from him for 150. They didn't know we resold it for 200. But we, you know what I mean? Like we just,
yeah.
it's the bottom line. It's just, it's the game. You know?
Yeah. And do you find a lot of times though, because there's this attorney involved that sellers use that as a time to kind of shop your offer around to a bunch of other
Not
people?
really.
No.
Like maybe 1 out of 10 will do that.
Oh,
But
oh,
normally we're like, listen, if are you 100% on board? Like we'll ask the seller. Like I'm big on sales process, and it's like, are you going to shop this around to someone else before the contract is signed, or do we have a deal? Do I have your word? Like we because
mhm,
we're so upfront with the seller. It's like if they're going to do that, I'd rather know now, and then I can figure out what we're going to do. But when a lot of like new investors, they get excited when they get a yes, and then they, the contract is a week away, right? I have one contract right now I still haven't gotten. I got that offer accepted 3.5 weeks ago. Go figure, right?
wow.
But they don't ask the seller the tough question.
Mhm,
Hey, are you sure this works for you? Like, is there anything you're like uncomfortable with right now? Anything that might be holding you back? Because if there is, let me know. I'd be happy to help you here. Because I'm expecting a contract from your attorney. And if there's any like issues up front, you want just to combat those things like as soon as you possibly can. Because,
mhm.
um, yeah, once you think you're getting a deal, at least if you're new, you're like, oh my God, I need this money. I need this business to work. And then if the seller screws you over, you're like defeated. And then that's why a lot of people quit the business.
Yeah. So you mentioned sales process, and from my understanding, you have a totally virtual sales process. Actually, you and your
Yes.
acquisitions guy are not even located in the same area. Um,
No. We live on opposite sides of the country.
yeah, which is pretty unique. Could you talk a little bit more about, um, I guess first your sales process would be a first good place to start
Sure.
there.
So our sales process is heavy on qualification. Like I've
Mm,
studied this business and I've taken deals that I've done and I've looked at my friends' deals and I've had clients that I've worked with and like all of this stuff. You you have to have a motivated seller. You have to have a motivated seller. And I'll get into what a motivated seller is. Like I'll give you like specifics on that. So
mhm,
there's 6 things that I've found in our business that have made deals up, right? The seller had a real reason for selling. Like they weren't just like, oh, what's your offer? Like they're selling for a certain reason. It doesn't have to be crazy, but it has to be a reason. Property usually needs some sort of work, whether it's a tear down or it needs updating or whatever. Seller's asking prices lower than Zillow, right? Not saying you got to go off that, but if they're already asking less than what the market is, that's a good sign for you as an investor. The fourth thing is they don't want to list it on the market for some reason. Because in my market, the biggest deal killer is I'm listing my house because it's worth a lot of money. Normal, right? It's a normal thing. So the people that we usually deal with don't want to do that, right? The fifth thing is a property's vacant, right? Like it's vacant, or like maybe one unit's vacant, or it's a triplex and you got 2 units vacant. There's some sort of vacancy going on. And then the last thing is the timeline.
All right, man. So you were saying the 6 point of qualification was time?
Yeah, so I'll get right into that. So the way that I look at like seller leads is, there's yeah, a lot of people talk about sales training, right? And I am a big believer in sales training, right? By the way, this is the Zoom background I was telling you about. That's
Yeah.
really cool.
There we go.
Uh anyway, you can't say the right thing to the wrong person. You can't say the right thing to a seller who's not qualified. So the way that I look at it is I looked at all the deals we've done over the years and deals my friends have done and deals clients have done. And every single seller has at least three, if not all of these boxes that I'm about to say. Seller
Mhm,
has a real why for selling their house. They're not just like, oh, I'm considering selling, I might sell. Like they're like, oh, I'm selling because I'm moving, or I'm selling because it needs too much work, or whatever the case is. Second thing is that they have their price is lower than Zillow, right? And that's just a little tidbit. Usually, what I found is if their asking price is less than Zillow, Redfin, whatever, MLS, usually there's a pretty good chance they're going to buy the house at a discount. Usually, if their initial asking price is that. Not saying
mhm,
it's like you have to have that, but I've found that has really helped. The third thing is property needs some sort of work. Like it either needs a total rehab, tear down, or it's like dated and it needs some updates. But there's some sort of a value add that we could do to that property. That
mhm,
was the third thing. The fourth thing is their property is vacant, or like there's a unit that's vacant, and if it's a multifamily, some sort of vacancy factor going on. The fifth thing is the timeline is within 6 months, 6 months or less. So could be today, could be next month, could be within 6 months, but they have some sort of a timeline. And then the last thing is that my favorite is they know they can get more, but they don't want to list their house for some sort of reason, right? They're like, I
mhm,
don't want to list my house because in my market, that's the biggest deal killer. Hey, I'm listing my house on the market. Like, I'm not going to take a discount for this thing. That's crazy. I'm going to list it. But when we get leads, we're like, oh, I don't want to list it. I want to sell it to an investor. High chance they're going to sell it at a discount. So the way that we screen our leads is we ask them questions based around those 6 things. And then
Mhm.
based on what they tell us, we decide if we can help them or not. And we are big on disqualifying, because if you try to disqualify a prospect, they're either going to tell you the truth and qualify themselves, or you're going to get to the reality of the situation, which is they're not a fit for your business,
Yep.
right? Like if you were a steak salesman and you were prospecting vegans all day, you'd go nowhere, because you could be really good at what your presentation is, but if you're not in front of the right people, doesn't matter how good you are at selling. So once they get qualified or disqualified, right, we then take them to the next step, which in our case is over the phone. We do another phone call where we basically get into a negotiation. We summarize exactly their situation. We show them how we can help them. You know, we empathize with them. We make sure we do our very good listeners. And then when it comes to the negotiation, number one, we want them to go first on price always. We
Mhm.
ask them commitment questions, conditional closing questions based upon what they're telling us. So it would sound like this. Hey, Mike, listen, if you got the price you wanted for your house, what would your next steps be? I would sign the contract. Okay, so it sounds like if you got the number that you're looking for, you'd be committing to signing the contract today, because there's a lot of competition in this business. You have to get deals fast,
Mhm.
right? And if you don't move fast, someone else is going to get it. So we precondition them to basically take an action, assuming we work the price out. And then once we get commitment from them, this is like literally our sales process in a nutshell. Once we get verbal commitment from them that they're willing to take action if we solve their problem, then we negotiate, right? And when we negotiate, we want the seller to go first. We generally come in with a low anchor, and we want to make them feel like they're working for us and we're not working
Mhm.
for them, right? So like a good example would be like, let's say we're at a price where we know we can make money at and the seller's cool with it. We won't just say, oh yeah, let's do it right now, sign up. We're like, ugh, I got to go talk back to my partner, because you have to do that or else they're going to feel like they're leaving money on the table. It's a mental, psychological thing. It's not like I don't want to do it like that, but like I know how humans are. And if you
Yeah.
don't do it that way, the deals aren't going to stick.
Yep.
So we go back, hey, I got to talk to my partner. He's going to ask me if we can do this number. Can you commit to signing? So we kind of precondition them again to like ask them to sign. Because a lot of people will have a good call with the seller, but they will not close the deal simply because the seller wasn't closable and they didn't ask the questions.
Mm.
Like if you get a lead and they're like, hey, I want to sell my house yesterday. And you say, hey, if you got a number that you're happy with, what would your next steps be? And they said, I don't know. I can't do anything right now. Don't make them an offer, because they're not going to do anything. You're just going to waste your time. So we basically do that over the phone in a repeatable process. And if we get deals right off the bat, that's great. Usually we don't, because that's reality. And we
Mhm.
follow up with the sellers in a certain way based on how they want us to follow up with them, right? Like whether it's a weekly thing or a monthly thing or a daily thing, it all depends. Sometimes we're
Mhm.
waiting for payoffs. But that's our virtual sales process. And then once we have the property in contract, we send someone out to take pictures, or the seller will take pictures for us, which is amazing. And
Yeah.
then if we're going to buy it ourselves, we'll send a contractor there and get a scope of work going. If I'm going to wholesale it, I'll put it out to the list, get some buyers in there with the seller directly. I'm not afraid to do that. And
Interesting.
if it's
You
a,
don't go, you don't
yeah,
have
if it,
anyone go there.
no, no, I don't care. Like, because in New York, it's like you can't get screwed. It's impossible. And then in other markets, I'm like, listen, buyer, if you screw me over, like you might get me on this one. But guess what? I'm gonna go online and talk a lot of shit about you. Like if you snake me out of the deal. It's like, so I just set expectations with people. And I don't listen, I don't give out the address in like another market. Like I like vet the buyers. I still sit in that seat in my business. So like I'm actively doing it. I vet them out. I make sure they're not an idiot. I ask them like strategic questions, like how are you paying for this property? How many flips have you done? Like, are you aware like this is a wholesale deal? I'm assigning the contract. Have you done that before? Like we have some people where like they don't know what an assignment is. And I'm like, okay, this is not going to be a house you're going to get yourself inside. Right.
Yeah.
I tell the buyer, hey, this is an assignment. Have you done an assignment? If they say they've never done an assignment before, I'm not even going to because they're just like, it's just going to be a pain in the ass. And they're, oh, I don't know what to do. It's like,
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
don't
Yeah.
do that. Like
Yeah.
we disqualify buyers just as we disqualify sellers. Because the thing with buyers too, and I can go on a rant about this, dude, if they want the property, they're going to jump through the hoops that you're going to make them jump through.
Mhm.
Simple as that. Simple as that. If they want the property, they're going to jump through the hoops. I'm a buyer too from wholesalers. I want the wholesale deal. I will follow up with a wholesaler to buy that property. It's simple,
Yeah.
right? But a lot of wholesalers are trying to follow up with buyers, and they're trying to sell something that doesn't make any sense to someone who doesn't want it, and they're wasting their time.
Yep. So,
Yeah.
talk about your dispo process a little bit then. I mean, you talked about it a little, but are you one of
Yeah.
those guys who, you kind of just want to get an estimate from the top few people and then maybe send the top 3 out? Or are you like,
No.
hey, let's send 10, or what's your
No, so it depends on the market. Right now, the market we're in, I'm a little bit more liberal with how I sell properties. Like, I used to be like, it's my way or the highway. Like, you go there for 10, like, you're going to be there from 1 to 1:30. There's going to be 25 of you guys there. You're going to all fight for this house. Offers are due at 5 p.m. Take it or leave it. Because that's how the market was. Like, you could do that, and it wasn't crazy to do that.
Hmm.
There's no favorites. There was no like, oh, my VIP buyers. Like, it just wasn't, because there was so much demand and there was no supply. It was insane. Now
Yeah.
that's completely changed, right? So I do not do that anymore. That does not work, right? If you try to do that now, you're not going to make money. So what we do now is,
Mhm.
depending on where the property is, the low hanging fruit is we send it to our email list. Like, I have email lists in all these different markets. New York's the best one by far, but the other ones are pretty good too. We send it out to the email list. If we send it out to the email list and people are jumping on it right away, we will do a multiple offer, kind of highest and best. Doesn't happen that often now, to be honest with you, but
Mm.
we do sell properties at ask price for sure. First come, first serve, right? Unless we know there's multiple people on that property, like, if that's not the case, we'll sell to the first person who makes us an offer who's qualified, right? Because
Mm.
now it's a lot of buyers are bailing, right? They don't want to buy. So we're not trying to get greedy. We're putting them out at margins where we're going to make money, but we're not going crazy because we want to keep the lights on,
Mhm.
If that doesn't work, the email list is like the low hanging fruit. I'll put it on a couple Facebook groups, and I'll try to get some buyers who might not be on my list to jump on it, and we'll send it out to them. That doesn't work, which is normally, at that case, I'm a little suspicious about the deal at that point, because like anything will sell at the right price. I
Yeah.
will go on the MLS and I will find, and this is only in New York and California and in Connecticut. I have that too, but I'll go on the MLS. I'll see all of the agents who sold properties for cash recently. And then I'll text them and say, hey, I saw you rep the client on this cash deal. I got one down the street. Do you want to sell it to your client or one of your clients? They usually always say yes. Then the second question I say is, this is an assignment of contract wholesale deal. Have you ever done a wholesale deal before? They say no. They don't even get, like, it doesn't even, I just delete them.
Yeah.
Usually they say yes because they know what's going on, and then okay, cool, and then we do business that way. So that's like our third way of doing it. Honestly, if we can't sell a deal like that, like, it's not a deal. Like, we've just done so many wholesale deals. We're like, if that's like 3 strikes. Strike 1, email list. Strike 2, Facebook group. Strike 3, MLS. If you can't sell a deal after that, you don't have a deal in your hands. It's locked
Yeah.
up too high. The
For
truth.
sure. Yeah.
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 Especially in like Jacksonville or like San Diego or Houston or like New York City. It's like, dude, someone's going to buy that if it's a deal. And if you can't sell it and everyone's seen it, it's not a deal.
It's not a
You
deal.
got to renegotiate.
Yep.
No. Yeah.
And then when you're, before when you were doing that strategy, I mean, 25 people showing up to the house, like, I mean, you just like setting seller expectations? Cause that's like, whoa, like,
Oh yeah.
what are these 25 guys doing here? Like,
Yeah. It's yeah, no worries, guys. Take your time. This is like back when the market was at its peak.
yeah.
So there was so much leverage with stuff. Like, this is when there was no inventory. Houses were going $85,000 over ask, like stupid shit like that.
Mhm.
And like, we knew like the undervalued wholesale deal had serious value in the market. So what I
Mhm.
would do when I've done this, so like I said, we've done this, like, obviously it depends on the deal, like the certain scenarios. Sometimes you can't do that. Sometimes you can. When we did do this successfully, we were upfront with the seller. Hey, listen, there's going to be a one-time access window. We're going to get everybody in at once. There's going to be contractors. There's going to be potential buyers. I'm going to be there. Like, this is like usually local, because this is where it gets really spicy. Like, if in San Diego, like when I lived there, I can show up there and I can conduct traffic. In New York, I have someone who can go there to represent me. Like, if we're going to do this crazy, like, insane strategy where we're going to get 25 people there at once. Once again, we don't do that now anymore because the market changed. But we would let the seller know, listen, it's going to be chaos in here. It's going to be like madness. There's going to be 25 people here. It's going to be for like 45 minutes max. It's going to be overwhelming, but it'll be all over in 45 minutes. And then that's the only time we need to get and see this property. That's it. Are you okay with that? Or is that probably not going to work? And we'll let them know 3 or 4 days before we're going to do this. We're not just going to call them the day of the showing. It's like, hey, this is what's going to go on. We get a gauge for it. And if they're cool with it, then usually listen, most sellers want their money. That's the truth.
Mhm.
So if they're cool with it, we go there, and it's exactly what we described. It's crazy. There's 25 people there. There's contractors. There's buyers. We're not lying. And we turn around and you know, that has literally made us like $30,000 over our ask price, like on
Wow.
wholesale deals. Like we took a 20 deal and turned it into a 50 deal because of all the demand and all the buyers see each other and the key is the deal still makes sense. Like it's priced cheap to start to drive that price up, right? Because
Mhm.
if you put a property out cheaper than it should be, the market will drive it up to what it's worth. But if you try to put something out that's super high and to try to get it to sell, you're just not going to have any success. So we
Yeah.
would do this on purpose to drive the 25 people in there. Like I said, we've done this probably like 7 or 8 times max, like back in the crazy market. But I just
Mhm.
remember like when I started doing this, I was like, oh my God, like we can literally like sell these deals for 3, 4, 5x what we thought we were going to sell it for. And I knew
Yeah.
this wasn't going to last forever. Like I knew this was going to be over eventually. But yeah, that was crazy. That was from 2020 to 2022, right? Like the beginning part of 2022. That worked, right?
Yeah.
And buyers would comply with that. But now with all the inventory and all the differences in the market, that doesn't like you're not going to be able to do that as successful as you unless you get the thing at a crazy price. But it's all
Mhm.
about knowing like big takeaway would be this like it's all about knowing where you're at. Like, do you have a lot of leverage over the buyers? If you do, then you can do this, right? If you don't, and you have like a lot of different wholesale deals to choose from, and there's like a certain amount of buyers, doing something like this wouldn't be that effective. But if you like in these houses that I was telling you about, like we're on contract at 45 cents on the dollar. We're trying to sell them for 70 cents on the dollar.
Yeah.
So like, you know, and these are a little bit cheaper in New York, but like, you know, these are spanking deals. So like people were like bidding up because they knew even if they paid more, they still got a crazy good deal. We just
Yeah.
happen to get a better deal from the seller, you know?
Sure. And
Yeah.
then, so that's been a change you've made in your dispo process.
Huge change. Yeah.
What other changes have you made in the last few months as the market's been shifting?
Yeah. So I look at properties now and I'm assuming that they're not going to be worth what the sold comps were. Right.
Mhm.
So like a lot of people are using these sold comps and I'm like, you got to look at actives and pendings because that's going to tell you what the thing is worth. Right. So a lot of people are going to Redfin and they're seeing like sold in April 2022. And it's like, that's the peak of the market, like literally right before it dropped. So what we're doing is we're basically taking like, let's say a property would be worth $700,000,
Mhm.
right? In the normal market. In our market now, with the way it's dropping, probably going to be like a 665 house based on the interest rates and all that stuff like that. So we're going to look at the deal based on the fact that it's going to sell for 665, even though it probably would have sold for 700 if the market didn't shift. So we're adjusting the numbers down for sure. That's the first thing we're doing. The second thing we're doing is we're not necessarily as concerned about the amount of volume that we do because at the end of the day, if we can do less volume but make more money on each deal, we just make more money. Like it's just easier. There's less drama, less fires, less liability. So if
Mhm.
we can get 4 or 5 deals a month and make 30 grand a deal, that's a lot better than getting 10 deals a month and making 8,000 a deal and having 8 different like it just gets to where you're like working your butt off on something with no pot at the end of the rainbow. It's just like, you know, a
Yeah.
bunch of work and I don't like that strategy. I mean, I've kind of done that like hodgepodge over the years where like we've done a bunch of big months and then like I realized like we didn't make much money. So I don't really care about the volume necessarily. I mean, we're still doing decent volume, but I'm really looking for like how do we make at least $20,000 a deal, $30,000 a deal, right? How do we buy this thing at a deep enough discount to where we can actually do that versus like before the market changed, we were like, oh, we're just going to sell this for more money because some idiot was going to pay more for it. And that just doesn't
Mhm.
exist anymore, you know?
Yeah. And are you running in any of your markets? Are you running into kind of this disconnect where, and sellers still kind of, or the majority of them are still expecting a price from 6 months ago, and
Yes.
obviously you're not there. You're way
Yes.
different. And what
Yeah.
is your
I mean,
strategy around that?
we just literally tell them like, we're not a fit. Like we get you want to sell. We understand that, you know, you want your price for the house. I get it. I'd probably do the same if I were you, but we're not a fit. Like we're not gonna like make an offer on a property that we can't deliver on. And like we'll justify. We'll say, listen, like I'm not gonna tell you a number that's too high because I want to be able to do what I say I'm gonna do. And if I tell you right now I can pay you X for your house and I can't close, we'd both be wasting our time and you'd be pissed off at me in 3 weeks. So those people usually we use that as like a disqualification metric. Because like
Mm.
people who want to do business today or in the next couple of weeks, they know they need to sell at a discount, and they are not necessarily as concerned about the price. I mean, obviously they're concerned about the price, but we're using the money as like a disqualification thing. We're like, listen, like if you want 300 for your house, you got to put it on the market.
Yeah.
We can't buy it for 300. You got to put it on the market. You should put it on the market. No, I don't want to do that. How come? Well, I don't have to wait. So what's more important, waiting to get more money or selling this thing in 2 weeks and selling it for 225? Is that 75 grand worth it for you? Like we can't tell you what to do, but we can just tell you what the decision you have to make is. And we got to get them to compare. Like if you want more money, you got to wait more time. If you want less money, you're going to get it, in 2 weeks, but you're going to have to leave 75 grand on the table. So, we just try to disqualify our prospects up front who aren't a fit. So then we can spend all of our time all day with people who are fit, and we can ultimately help more people by doing that,
Yeah. And then
like you can't convince a seller to take a discount on their house. I've never seen that happen. They have to all you want to take the discount. You have to just show them how it'll help them.
Yeah. I always tell my guys, no pain, no sale.
Dude, there's no pain, no sale. Yeah, like if there's no pain, you tell them there's no pain, and they're either going to say you're right or no, I actually didn't mention that my tenant hasn't paid rent in 3 weeks. Oh shit. Okay. You see, like when you push away, they're always going to like tell you the truth. Because if I'm like, hey Mike, it sounds like there's no way we could do our podcast at 6 o'clock tonight. You're either going to say, yeah, I can. I'm going to be at dinner. Or yeah, Greg, you know what? We can do it at 6 o'clock. I actually got an opening. Like you can't get hurt by going negative on the seller. It's impossible because you're just going to get to the truth.
Yeah, they won't let you. They'll rope you back in as you're trying to
They'll
hang up
rope
the
you back
phone.
in. No, don't worry. Hey, Mike, it sounds like if we're not at 200, we have no shot of doing business. Well, I don't know. I mean, maybe we could do. Yeah, and then like they're starting to justify it. It's the craziest thing ever.
I had a guy earlier who
Human beings.
said he was firm at 280. I'm like, I'm out at 280. And we hung up and he called me right back. He's like, what about 260? I'm like, still no, but thanks for giving me a call back. And he's like, okay, now I really can't go lower. I'm like, okay, that's cool.
It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy, dude. It blows my mind. We had a guy in Houston the other day. We have to renegotiate, but he wanted 180, stern as it could be. And I told my acquisitions guy, I'm like, we got to be at 120. He gets the deal at 120. And I was like, that seemed too easy. Something is not right here. Put it out to wholesale for 140. I messed the ARV up. Totally my fault. It was in a shitty neighborhood. I thought it was a better neighborhood. Now we got to be at like 100, like 95, 100. So now I'm like, I think I know why this guy took 120 because I bet you a bunch of other people offered him like 115, 110.
Yeah.
It's just, the thing with this business is like, you're gonna make mistakes even when you do a lot of deals. So you're gonna screw things up. Like you can't expect everything to be perfect, especially when you're working with an off-market consumer who's generally distressed. Like you're going to be dealing with people who don't have integrity a lot of the times, just to be honest with you. And you guys got to like be numb to like all the BS, and you got to just desensitize it because it'll drive you crazy. If you don't like desensitize yourself to this stuff, you're going to like literally lose your mind because there's just so much drama. And if you can't isolate and separate that drama, it's like, dude, it's a mess.
Yeah. And actually on the marketing side, like, have you changed anything on your marketing side since the market has shifted?
Yeah, we've done a lot more online marketing. So we still do a lot of mail. We spend a lot of money. Yeah, we spend a lot of money we spend 15, 20,000 a month on marketing. So we do a lot of mail. That's always worked because it's really like momentum based, and we've been mailing for a while. So like the campaigns get better over time usually, but we spend a lot more money now on online marketing. So we're spending money on, I'm just moving back to my little makeshift office here.
And now we know
Google,
now we know it's a
Google
fake background.
Of course, yeah. A lot of stuff on Google, like Google AdWords. We spend like $3,000 a month on that.
Okay.
Which isn't that much money in the grand scheme of things. And we buy leads from this company called propertyleads.com. They're like organic SEO leads that are pretty good. Like pure SEO, like no bullshit. We get our own SEO leads from our websites, and then we buy leads from like Need to Sell My House Fast, which are not all online leads, by the way. Like they're good leads, but they're not all SEO leads. I have figured that out. Some people are like, why are you calling me? And we're like, well, you filled out a form on a website. And they're like, well, I'm not selling. So like clearly like they're getting leads from all over the place, but they are pretty good leads for the most part. And we're texting too, but like texting is just like a little ancillary, like kind of like we're already kind of mailing these people, so we might as well text them kind of strategy. So that's that's our marketing, like literally in a nutshell. And then we have other investors bring us deals like JV deals and shit like that, and that's literally how we get deals.
And you said you shifted a lot more to online with the market change. Why was that?
You need to speak to less people, right? They're coming to you.
Yeah.
Like they're calling you. Like I bet you we probably got a few online leads since literally since we've been on the show. I'm looking at our CRM. Like they come to you at all times of the day. They're already filling out forms. Like they're jumping through hoops that you've already set up on your website. So when you call them and you're like, why are you selling? They explain exactly why they're selling, right?
Yeah.
Versus like, oh, I might sell. It's a cold call. Okay, maybe at the right price. It's like, you know what I mean? Like it's a completely different conversation. Like we need to speak to like 10 or 15 people to get a deal with internet leads versus like with texting, it's like 25. You know what I mean? It's just completely different. People are a lot more motivated. They understand like what you're doing. Like they understand they're selling at a discount usually, not all the time, but usually. And it's just like a little bit easier to talk to these people because they're already like kind of pre-screened via your website. That's what I found, at least. Like they're just better leads, you know?
Yeah.
They're motivated. They're just more motivated. I mean, actually, direct mail leads are pretty motivated too, but that that can get a little dicey because you get really pissed off people with mail or you get really motivated people. It's kind of like that's what I've found. Like they're either like calling and being like, yo, I gotta sell this, or they're like, take me off your effing list. I don't want to get any more mail from you. Like this is insane. So I've just been like, you know, if we just mail and do internet leads, that usually gets us the deals we need to get to do our goals, you know.
Yeah. I got you. And are you mailing like distress lists or you just keep it
Yeah,
general?
we don't really have a lot of success though with the distress list, which is kind of ironic. Like the tax delinquents and like code by like those lists are not that great in our market. Like we have success with like high equity owner occupied and like absentee owners and unknown equity. The probate list is pretty good, like, but that's like either hit or miss. Like they're either really motivated or they're fucking pissed, understandably so. Yeah, we're not. I mean, we have the tax delinquent list. That list hasn't produced anything. It used to be great, but now it's just like doesn't really work that well. But yeah, I mean, we just like a lot of our lists are like, you know, absentee owners and owner occupied, high equity, seniors. Like, cause I just want to like, if I'm mailing somebody, I just want like them to have equity and like them to have ownership in that property for a while. Cause it's usually deferred maintenance. That's what I found. Like if you've owned the house for 25 years and you have equity, like you're probably gonna like, and it's absentee owned, like you're probably gonna be more open to selling at a discount versus like some dude who just bought his house last year. It's like, you know, moved in and it's all renovated. And they're like, yeah, you know, I'll sell my house for top dollar. It's like, okay, sure. That won't work.
Yep.
You know?
Gotcha. And then it's interesting that you do a lot of direct mail and a virtual acquisition strategy because you know most direct mail guys I know are really big on running in-person appointments, and we used to do a lot of direct mail before things shifted in the market. It slowed down a bit, and at the time I was running all in person. So do you not? Maybe it's just a mindset thing, right? But you know, I always kind of got the feeling that direct mail people kind of wanted you to come out to the house, but maybe it's just all in my mind.
I mean, especially with who we mail, it doesn't really affect us. Like we're mailing absentee owners, so they don't live there anyway, right? So I think a lot of it is who we mail, vacant houses, right? Inherited people, like inherited properties, probate. A lot of the lists that we mail, like we still will go on an appointment, but it doesn't need to be a sales appointment. It's like we'll send someone out there to like meet the seller to take pictures, you know. Doesn't have to be me or my acquisitions guy, right? So no, we haven't really found that to be a problem. I mean, I will say like there are some deals in Delaware where like Brett went on the appointment and that's the only reason we got the house. Like for sure, because he was there, right? So like there's value in that. It's not part of our standard process. That's the way I look at it. Like it's like we do appointments, but they're not our standard process. It's an exception. It's not a rule.
It's like if they're very much wanting that, someone at least to come by and see it.
Yeah. I don't mind. Like it doesn't bother me. Like, I went to a house 3.5 of the one I was still waiting for the contract. I showed up there and got the deal, right? But it's like I don't go on a lot of appointments, like because I know they're usually a waste of time. You know, I can make them an offer. I'll get a no over the phone and I'll go get 3 more offers out that hour versus driving there, getting a no, driving back, tire goes flat. Let's just like, fuck that. Like, just get the no
Yeah.
on the phone,
Yep. Yeah, I'm with you. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then so you have one acquisitions guy who works on your team, and then you still do
One
acquisitions?
guy, I have an assistant who helps me with like some marketing stuff. She orders mail, she does texting, she does some transaction coordination stuff, help. And then we're bringing on another employee to do a lot of just like the front end lead stuff, like just because we're getting bottlenecked now. We're like, if he's not working or something, like I'm gonna pick the call up because like it's an expensive lead,
Mhm.
So we're bringing someone on to basically own the phones, and be able to take leads and like, I don't really care about their hours. I just care that they're basically going to be able to call these sellers back,
Right.
because that's really like where you'll get fucked with online leads is like if you don't call people back within 10 minutes, like you might as well throw that lead in the toilet because they're
Oh, yeah.
calling around. You're not it's so competitive. Like you got to be on top of it. Like we've gotten deals where people have been like, oh, you're the first ones who called me back, so we'll give you the opportunity to buy the house. And it's like, that's a closable deal, right? So if you're
Mhm.
not calling them back, you're throwing $300-400 in the garbage,
Yeah. A buddy of mine who does a lot of SEO leads, I thought it was a funny strategy. Like, I mean, he calls them right away, right? And his strategy is I want to keep them on the phone for as long as possible, like 30 minutes, because I want them to be so tired and feel like I've already like addressed all their things that they're like, oh, I don't want to call the next guy. like they've already logged out of the computer window. They're already walking around talking to him,
Oh yeah,
right? They're just giving up on
yeah,
calling
man,
the next guy. It's too much work. It's
yeah.
too much effort.
No need to do that. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of stuff too is like, dude, if you just are cool on the phone and you're like there to solve their problem and like they're cool with you and like the price isn't insane, like they're not going to shop with you. Like, you know what I mean? Like if you build a lot of value with someone and you address their needs and the price isn't outrageous,
Hmm.
people don't want to shop around. Like I don't want like if I want to buy this hat, I want to go to one store with this hat. If I have to go to another store because the hat isn't available, that's one thing. But human beings don't want to shop around. They just don't want to feel like they're
Yeah,
leaving money on the table either. You know?
100%. And then your acquisitions guy that you brought on, I think this may be an interesting topic for some people is, what's your strategy with, getting them trained up and just kind of ongoing sales management?
Yeah. So he was already working for an investor before he worked with me. So he already
Mhm.
kind of knew the game. So he I guess he cut his teeth with someone else, which is good for me.
Yeah.
And so when he
Yeah.
came on board, when he came on board, he already knew what he was doing, and then he just got better as we got more leads for him. So the
Mhm.
way that we did it was like he would hear me on the phone, in the beginning, and he already knew what he was doing because he already had experience. And then every Tuesday, what we do is we just do a sales training. Like him and we go on a Zoom call and we role play or we talk about deals that we're doing and how the sales process is effective, or he'll hear me on the phone or I'll listen to him on the phone. But we'll do some sort of Tuesday sales training where we just are a little bit more intentional about what we're doing.
Mhm.
But a lot of his learning is just from being in the trenches, calling me about deals. We're going over the deals together. Hey, this is the deal killers. Hey, this is why they're selling. Hey, this is exactly what we need to get them to commit. And then
Mhm.
like him and I just going like line by line in the battle together. Like that's how he's gotten really good. It's like from experience. Like just he's not afraid to be a savage because I've trained him. I'm like, dude, like you can't be afraid to ask tough questions. Like go
Yeah.
for the truth because you're gonna find out no matter what. You might as well just go for you know?
Yeah. Even if you don't want to hear it, just ask the question.
Yeah, like being like, hey, it sounds like you're on board to sell, but you're probably gonna shop someone else before you make a decision. Because if that's what they're gonna do, you'd rather find out now
Yeah.
because you have a chance to save it.
Yeah.
Versus like thinking you're getting the deal and then you're like, oh, I'm so sorry, we're selling to someone else. It's like that's fine, but you should find that out now so you
Yeah.
can address it. Yeah. Oh my God, dude. I can talk about sales for hours, dude. It's just because it's fascinating how it works. If you really think about how humans make decisions, it's crazy.
Yeah.
Like all the stuff that goes into it.
Yeah. I've done a lot of sales stuff myself.
Oh, it's fun.
What places have you learned sales from or books?
Yeah. Sandler sales training for sure.
Yep.
Sandler, John Martinez, Steve Trang's got some pretty good stuff. Who else? Todd Toback's got really good sales training. Um, who else is good? Chris Voss, Never Split the Difference. That's a great book. That's really good. Spin Selling, Neil Rackham. That's a good book. Yeah, I mean, I've read all the books, dude. Like you get Grant Cardone, Jordan Belfort. I've read all those books, dude.
Yeah.
Read all of them, studied them. Bradley. I try to learn from everybody and then put my own spin on it, because like sometimes I'll like use something that maybe John Martinez may have said, but I've tweaked the way you say it. Maybe it wasn't as good back, like maybe like back when he was saying it, it was like a different market, and now like we're in a different market. So I just take everything and I try to put my own spin on it, not like copy it, but just like improve it a little bit.
Sure.
And then like, we come up with our own variations of it. You know what I mean? Like my main thing with sales is like, if you can ask good questions, and people ask like, what a good question, open-ended questions. Like, how long has this been going on for? What's the problem? Where do you want to be? What's the biggest issue you're feeling? How long has that been? Like, you're going to get the seller to talk. And then when they're talking, you can summarize what they're saying and build rapport. Sounds like you're really stressed out about this property. It sounds like your daughter's like the most terrible person in the world, just screwing over your other daughter. Seems like you're stressed out of your mind about this house. Yes, yes, yes. And then they feel like you understand them, and then you build rapport, and then you can get a discount easier. So it's all like a whole like little system. And like people, if you're new, it's like you think this is like craziness. It's not. It's a system. Like everything is like a system.
Yeah.
Selling is a system. Dispositions is a system. Marketing is a system. All that stuff is like a system, and you have to think about it like that because it just makes it easier to operate every day.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting you say that. I've read pretty much all the same books that you have.
Mhm.
I haven't read Spin yet. That's on my list, but all the other ones.
It's a good book. I've got to reread that. It's been a while since I listened to that one.
Yeah, there's some. I actually read the that Sandler book, the bike book. Can't teach you how to ride a bike at the seminar twice a year.
It's a great book.
Such a good book.
That's a great book. That's a
He's
great
got some.
book.
He's got some really good audios on Audible. You can listen to David Sandler's old trainings too. It's gold.
David Sandler. Oh man, I gotta go check that out. David Sandler.
$40 to listen to his old seminars all the way through. It's crazy.
Oh, guy's a
Gold.
fucking legend, bro. David Sandler.
Yeah. Cool, man. So you do right now, you're the majority of your lion's share of your business is in New York, or you were saying 70%?
Yeah, about 70% of that business in New York. Just because now with like the introduction and all that stuff, it was like we have the infrastructure there, we have a great buyers list there, we have a great team there, like contractors and vendors and insurance guys and this, that, attorneys. It's just a little bit easier at this point. But since my acquisitions guy lives in Delaware, we definitely invest there too. We just don't do as much in Delaware at this point. So I've just found like if you can virtualize your business, doesn't matter where you are. Like you could, if you don't need to physically be at the property like yourself, it's like you can invest anywhere. Like if you gave me a deal in Dayton, Ohio, like, and it was a deal, we'd find a way to make money on it because we understand the process of like getting the deal and getting the buyers and figuring out the value. And like, it's all the same thing, which is cool. Cause like, I bet you 20 years ago, you couldn't do this business like virtually as easily, but now with all like BPO photo flow and DocuSign and FaceTime, it's like, you could just do everything virtually. You don't need to physically be there. It's crazy.
What was that?
Google Street View.
EPO photo
Oh,
flow? What's that?
BPO photo flow. It's like a service where you can have someone take pictures of properties for you.
Really? And they're nationwide or most markets, or?
I think they're in most areas. Yeah, you could do Home Jab is another one. HOMEGAB, Home Jab. I use Craigslist a lot. Just call Craigslist. Hey, who wants to take pictures of a property for $100? Like, you could get anyone to take pictures. It's so easy now to like just do it like that. You seller takes pictures of it. Like, so yeah, I'm really grateful, and it's been a fun ride, and I'm looking forward to the future,
Yeah. So you mentioned contractors. You're doing some flips as well in New York?
Yeah, I'll do a few flips a year, like nothing crazy. I'll do more wholesales where we'll like just clean them out and throw them back on the market. But if I'm going to do a flip, the numbers got to be great. Got to be a big spread there because there's always screw ups with construction, and I got to have a good contractor to do it. That's like the key. It's like, got to have a big spread. Got to have, you're going to probably go over budget, most likely. That's just the reality of it. And you got to have a contractor who's going to be reliable. And that's not easy. Got to have a guy who's going to do what they say they're going to do. There's good, fast, and cheap. You got to pick 2 out of 3, right?
Yeah.
That's what I say.
Yep.
And I'll usually pick the fast and good. Cheap, it's like, it depends, Sometimes cheap is bad.
Especially if it takes 6 months and then you pay the difference in hard money. So
exactly.
And so how did you, I mean, you're doing it, it's to be fully virtual with contractors is like a whole different level
Yeah.
of needing a really good
You
guy,
got to
right?
remember though, like in New York, it's like I'm virtual, but I'm really not virtual because like I know everybody and like I've showed up here so many times. It's not like it's not like, you know what I mean? Like I don't go there, but like I am basically from here. And then in
Mhm.
Delaware, Brett lives there. So I don't go to the house. Brett will go to the house. And then in California, you know, if I have to show up there, I already live there. It's not like that big of a deal. So like when I say virtual, I mean New York completely, Delaware completely. And then in California, if we're doing a flip and I have to physically show up, I'll like I'm not gonna be like, no, my business is virtual. I'm not showing up to pay the contractor. I'm gonna teleport there. It's like, no, I don't
Right.
show up. Like I don't get all bent out of shape over that, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. But you seems like you found some pretty good guys, at least that when you
Yeah,
do a flip, you can trust them and they'll kind of run the process for
100%.
you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I treat I vet them. I disqualify them. Hey, if you're interested in this job, if I know
Mhm.
them, it's one thing. It's easy. But if I
Sure.
don't know them, I'm like, okay, send me an email, send me an invoice, send me a scope of work, and send me all your insurance docs. If they don't do that, they're already disqualified. It makes my life so much easier. You have
Yeah.
24 hours to submit it. If you can't do that, then why the hell am I going to give you a deposit to screw one of my houses up? So I don't like I disqualify them on purpose. Like it's like anything. Everything's like a funnel. Hey, if you want this job at this price, send me the scope, the budget, the insurance, this, all to my email by Friday at 5 p.m. I give them a reasonable time to do it, but like if they can't do that, then how are they supposed to like open the walls up and do the electric? It's like, you know
Right.
what I mean? Like I
Get
make it
permits.
to
Yeah.
where like, yeah, it's like I just make it to where it's like if you can't do the simple things, I'm not going to give you a job that's $50,000. You know?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I think
Word.
that's where people make the biggest mistake is they just hire a
Oh yeah.
contractor and they meet him once and it's like, you
Totally.
don't even know if he doesn't have a
Yeah,
process. How's he gonna stack all the subs that he needs to get this job done? I mean, it's,
exactly, bro. Exactly.
yeah.
Exactly.
Well, cool, man. Well, there's always a couple questions that I like to ask at the end here. First one's a little fun one, which is what is the craziest or most uncomfortable situation that you have ever experienced with a seller?
Poughkeepsie, New York. Went to a house. The guy was really sketchy, and I didn't go inside because I had like a bad feeling about this guy. So we went in his garage, and like he had all these lawnmowers inside there, and I was kind of like, "What the f is going on here?" So like I realized I couldn't buy the property because he like owed too much. So on my way out of the garage, I was in the driveway, and I was like, "Hey, I can't buy the house. I'm sorry. I wish you the best of luck." And he like came up to me, and he's like, "I'm broke and I need money," and he literally started charging at me, like slowly, kind of walking. So I literally like unlocked my car. I swear to God, unlocked. I had the whole thing recorded too, on my old phone. Started running to like slowly running, walking towards my car. Got in there, and like you heard the recording. I was like, I turned the car on and like gunned down the road. And the guy was like trying to, I guess, rob me, but like I would, if he didn't have a gun or a knife, I would have literally karate chopped him. He's like a stupid old crusty guy. So like, I mean, that was a little scary because like I didn't expect that.
Yeah.
It was really uncomfortable, and I like was definitely fucked up. I still am a little fucked up from it. Like I'm a little scared to go to houses like to this day. Like I still obviously do it, but like it kind of like threw me off for a while.
Yeah.
Just because like I didn't expect that. And it's just like super like just weird. That was the most uncomfortable for sure. I've had other ones where like they were just like crackheads in there and like they were selling drugs and it's like whatever, like the
Yeah.
pit bulls, and it's like, I usually go in there with a friend or something, which is like, normal.
Yeah.
But yeah, the one in Poughkeepsie definitely threw me off for sure, bro. That scared me.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a scary one.
Dicey.
Uh,
Dicey. Yeah.
so, second question is, I mean, you've obviously been in the business 7 years now. So you've
Yeah.
gained a lot of experience along the way. If you could go back in time, and give yourself one piece of advice, when you're looking for your first deal, knowing what you know now, what would you say to yourself?
Do you have a budget or not a budget?
Well, let's pretend you have $1,000 like you had.
All right, you got to get really good at like getting a niche list and calling and texting it. So like if you can get access to like the like Florida's got the best public records I've ever seen. So if you can get like public records like Florida or some sort of like a list that I was telling you earlier with like vacant, tax delinquent, you got to get a really targeted list that is actually like high probability of selling. By the way,
Mhm.
those people are hard to get in touch with for a reason. And you want to work that list for like 3 or 4 hours a day and get people to start raising their hand, because the reason it's hard to get in touch with them is because their houses are fucked up. And a lot of the guys like me at this point don't want to touch them because we'd rather just pay for the Google lead or something like that. So it's like kind of an untapped market. And you can get yourself into a situation where you get a really good deal on your hands. And you might not need to be that good at sales because you're already running into a problem that's hairy, vacant,
Yeah.
property taxes, foreclosure. So I would say really focus on getting good at your public records in your local county and
Mhm.
finding out how you can get these like ultra distressed properties. And it's not that expensive to do that. It just requires a lot of time. And you have to really understand the game, and you got to
Mhm.
know how that works,
Yeah. Cool. Well, awesome piece of advice for people starting out. Greg, if people want to reach out to you with questions, or maybe they want to JV with you in one of your markets that you're in, how would they go about doing that?
Yeah, they can just email me, Greg, at velocityhousebuyers.com, and just, hit me up on there. I'm pretty reachable. I'll get back to you. I'm not going to ghost you. And, I'll get back to you, and, anything I can do to help, let me know.
Cool. All right, man. Well, thanks for coming on the show. Appreciate it.